Last week on this this journey, this series, this march toward building an acoustically isolated recording studio for Voiceover, I did kind of a soft launch. I moved my recording gear up into this room, so as I started adding in absorbers and diffusers and that sort of thing, mostly absorption, I wanted to hear and record what this room sounded like so I could hear the material change. This week I'm actually more fully moving in. I'm completing the move, in other words, and I'm committing to this space. So there I was on my lumber pile and of course stumbled upon this siding, and I realized, aha, I can use that for diffusion. When I finish this room, and God willing and the creek don't rise, I will eventually get it done. I'm going to need two things. One is absorption and one is diffusion. And I realized that double bullnose siding is going to make perfect diffusion. I just have to take these pieces here, which were cut out from the outside wall when I had to make a bigger hole in my house to put in the new windows, and I'm going to just pull that stuff off. And I'm going to get my heat gun and my scraper, and I'm going to take the paint off. Then I can sand it all up. I can build my boxes. Essentially, when I'm ready to go, I'll have that wood prepped already to make the diffusion. I don't know how many I'll make. I don't know where I'll put them, but some will be vertical and some will be horizontal. Anyway, that's my project today. I'm just sort of getting back into it, and at least it's motion. Step 1 was cutting the siding pieces to a uniform length, easy to do with a stop on the fence, and I assembled the smaller panels in the shop. And then one of my favorite things to do on a beautiful spring day, taking the shop work outside. I built small frames to contain the siding pieces, and finally a bit of sanding and a lick of primer and paint.
Where's your ball?
I'm working out what now to do with my absorbing panels. The ones I have in my booth currently are, I think they were 24 inch by 48. I'm going to use those. Those work fine, and they will be fine on the end walls where I have the actual space to lay them out. They're going to dominate the wall because of the small space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jackknife the panels like this. As I mentioned, there is a countertop that's going to go in there. What came out of the office when it was an office was actually an old door that I had simply used as a desktop. And that's going to sit along the back wall where sort of in behind me. Not only will it form a surface on which I can put, my coffee and pictures and books or whatever, bric-a-brac, as you know, that's the kind of thing that usually collects on a horizontal surface in any office. It also will serve as a barrier so I don't crack my head by getting too close to that wall. It's 17 inches to where the ceiling begins, and so that jackknife is going to go up another 30 inches on the ceiling portion. So it's going to jackknife at, I don't know what the angle is in terms of a compass, but it's basically this. So if you said, what's the angle, Mike? This is the angle, whatever that is. In my current booth, my absorbers are stood off the wall by roughly the same thickness that they are, which is 2.5 to 3 inches. There is an equation involved. Sound will pass through the absorbing material, hit the wall, and come back, and they would get a second crack at it, as it were. So, I can follow instructions. I think that's a good idea. It makes sense. It's reasonable. So I'm going to try and do that. I drilled some holes to allow greater acoustic energy access to the insulation, and with two of my favorite girls, niece Michaela and my terrier Scout, put together the broadband absorbers. Don't staple my thumb, of course. That goes without saying. Once each frame had cloth backing, I pressed in the rockwool insulation, and Michaela measured and cut the broadcloth I was using for the facing. In the end, they came out pretty good, and no more lumpy than an old motel mattress. Back inside the room, and skipping ahead just a bit, I installed the broadband absorbers and what I began to think of as these beach chair panels to start the process of acoustic finishing. And I began a series of recording tests to mark each major change.
Absorber?
Yeah, okay, well, it's not good enough. I was going to say it's not bad, but no, it's not quite acceptable yet. What I'm missing and what I really need to do is I need to add proper bass traps to the corners. I built this out of 1x3 and just a bit of 1/2-inch plywood. It'll do the job really well, I think. So I'm just going to carry on and stuff this. Without the capable assistance of my niece Michaela, I'm kind of at 6s and 7s here, as I think the English say. So I'm just going to put some staples in. I'll try and draw it taut, and then just go from there and see if I can't make this fabric work. It ain't gonna be, pretty, but all my Frankenstein work will be in the back side of it where you won't see it, which is good. Now this bass trap does look like an old motel mattress that's seen much better days. And because of my lower ceiling height in this room, I had looked for alternatives to the standard sort of 2-inch foam tiles. It turns out that size does matter. These are a woven polyester apparently. They're pressed. They're a very rigid, you can see they're a very rigid and very dense material, which is meant to be an absorption panel. I like the look of them. But more importantly, what I'm actually doing is I'm standing them off, like my other broadband absorbers. I'm using these really handy push pins. They're a little T push pin, very simple but very effective. So I'm driving them into drywall. I set up my monitoring and my recording position in the room, and I would run music that was familiar to me. I would play back familiar music so that I could hear what the room was doing, in addition to making voice recordings, of course, on each change to the room. As I mentioned, it was as important to listen to the room as to run software tests to see what the room was doing. It's important also to hear it for yourself. As much as I'm not really on speaking terms with the science side of sound so much as I am on the art side, we do chat once in a while, and I've just done a couple of little quick tests with this EQ wizard. I can see on my modal distribution in this room where the peaks are and where the nulls are, the peaks and valleys. And what's interesting is I then ran some sine wave tests at the points where I have a null, where I have a dip, where the signal, those frequencies are phasing out and causing a dip in my response. Now we come back into the left channel. I'm not going to be able to make this flat. This is not going to be a flat room. It can't be. Every room has modes that naturally exist as a result of the size of the room, the dimensions of the room. And where those sound waves come together and are in phase, they will combine and you'll get a peak at that particular frequency. And the opposite is true, where their signals come together, whatever the frequency is, they come together, they're out of phase, they will produce a dip, they'll produce a null. What I'm trying to do with the absorption and the diffusion is to mess with those equations a little bit, to suck up some of the energy with absorption and to diffract and reflect and deflect and disperse the signals with my diffusion, to try and help that so that I can mess with the waves and mess with the room modes. But I'm not going to eliminate them entirely. It is important for me to know, and it's interesting to know where they are. It's adding, it's math. I love math. I don't, I do not do math, as you know. But anyway, so it's nice to look at the graphs. It's nice to look at the science of sound and to hear that as well. What I can do about it? Well, this is the question.
I'm just trying to size this.
To either side of the window, I installed these really beautiful acoustic panels that I got from thequietroom.ca. And they simply stand off the wall, which helps acoustically, and you simply install your spacers and then mount your panels. Against those panels, I mounted my guitars, and my Gretsch looks great. And speaking of that Gretsch, this is my twin brother Marty that you're hearing. He is a supremely talented guitar player, whereas I most decidedly am not.
Now that is beautiful.
In running a number of different tests on this room to see what kind of shape it was in, it was pretty clear that I had a lot of work to do, and that was some time ago when I made the first tests, and I have made improvements since then. The room is not ever going to be flat. In looking at the waterfall graph, they look like mountain ranges, and there's a lot of math in them thar hills. But those hills aren't ever going to be prairie. It's not ever going to be flat, but it told me that I needed to do a bit more work on my bass trapping. I will continue to tweak. Okay, check 1 2. There's no doubt of that. I'll always try and seek to make more improvements. But by and large, it's a really, really quiet room. In fact, it is very, very quiet. If ever you've switched on a pair of noise cancellation headphones, for example, I borrowed a pair of Bose cancellation headphones to do some testing. It feels and sounds like that. The world just goes shh, and it's shut out. Waveforms will still rise above that. I mean, if an airplane goes overhead or my dog runs out, 20 feet away and bark, 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 I'll probably hear a little bit of that, Those things I can deal with. It's the It's the rhubarb, it's the rumble, it's the everyday world, it's the sound inside this room. And it's very, very quiet. And that's what I aimed for, and that's what I got. Today on SoundSense, I'm going to revisit something that I thought I was done with. I thought I had finished up, and I had said, and I had indicated that I would likely be tweaking my acoustics in here a little bit as I went, which I'd intended to do. What I'm doing now, though, is not a tweak. It's basically not a complete rebuild on my acoustics, but certainly I'm taking some of them out. I'm adding in more acoustic absorption. I'm moving my pieces around, and I'm redoing the room. And there are two reasons for that. One is that recently I had responded to a casting call for, I think it was an e-learning project, and it was put out by a very successful voice actor by the name of Matt Kalrick, who works in Canada, Australia, US. He also has a production company, and it was his casting call. And he was very gracious and very thoughtful to come back to me with some feedback on my audition. Which is very unusual, to say the least, and I was very grateful. And what he said was that relative and compared to all the other pros that had submitted, my sound was a bit too live. And I thought, on the one hand, it was rather discouraging, and it was a bit mysterious to me, because since I had finished the room, I've been recording for clients in North America and Europe, certainly. And they've been paying me, and nobody's mentioned a thing. I wouldn't expect them to, but, the very fact of being hired, you think you're doing well, right? And off you go. Well, Matt stopped me short with his comment, and I was very grateful for it. And it caused me to really think about it. The second thing that happened was Santa Claus managed to squeeze his bulk down the chimney. Not this one, but the one downstairs. And brought me these Bayer Dynamic DT770 Pros. Very good closed-back headphones in the voiceover community, widely regarded, I think, and largely accepted as not a de facto standard necessarily, but widely regarded as the pair of headphones to have, because they're very neutral, they're very flat, they're very revealing. I've been using a pair of KRKs, which match my speakers here. So when I put these headphones on, I could clearly hear what Matt was talking about. I've always liked an open sound. I've always preferred more air in my audio. I like an airier sound than you get. And maybe that's my television background. I've always thought there was more air in a TV mix than you would find in radio, for example. But nevertheless, with Matt commenting on my audition and listening suddenly almost around the same time with a pair of revealing headphones to the room, I realized I need to redo this. I need to add in more absorption, which is what his comment really was. And it's absolutely true, and I'm grateful, Matt. Thank you. So I am building, I think, at least a half dozen more absorbers using Roxol Safe and Sound, which is a 3-inch bat insulation, and 16 inches by 48 roughly. I'm going to add in at least 6. I'm going to have 2 across the top, down the sides, in conjunction with my beach chairs, which you see there. Basically, I'm going to wrap my space. So that's what I'm going to get up to. I'm back into my shop. I'm making frames. I went back to the fabric store, bought another, I think, 10 yards of this broadcloth that I've been using, and I'm going to get down to making some more absorption. I thought I'd put this to bed. I thought the kid was in bed sleeping. I was on the couch, started to watch a movie, cracked a cold one. But no, the kid's squalling. He's at the top of the stairs looking through the railings, and he needs attention. So I got to put him back to bed again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the terminus. This is the last stop. Please ensure that your seats are returned to the upright position and you take all personal belongings with you. Thank you for joining me on this ride. I had a lot of fun, and I really do hope that you did too.